Now, this session is titled Building for the World, Rise of a Product Nation, and is moderated by Atul Batra, CTO, Algnomy, with Monish Darda, founder and CTO, iCertis, Sindhu Joseph, founder and CEO, CogniCor Technologies, and Sparsh Gupta, co-founder, Wingify, speakers. Atul is also the chair for NASSCOM's Product Council and a member of the NASSCOM Executive Council. Atul is focused on driving the latest innovations in AI, advanced analytics, cloud, big data, IoT, mobile, and social, and how they're coming together to create the perfect storm for consumer businesses and customers alike. Please join me in welcoming Atul, Monish, Sindhu, and Sparsh on stage. The stage is all yours. Atul, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Shreya. Greetings, everyone. It is a privilege to moderate the session themed Building for the World, Rise of a Product Nation, and host some great leaders, some real practitioners who exemplify the topic and the promise for our country. So we really have a terrific panel, and I want to mention we have great diversity in every respect. Our panelists are tuning in from across India and also the US. They represent different product spaces, different segments in terms of customers and geographies they serve, and at different stages of revenue, etc. So let me quickly introduce them. So firstly, we have Sindhu Joseph. Sindhu is founder, CEO of CogniCor Technologies, a category leader for digital assistant platform serving the financial wealth management sector. Sindhu is tuning in from the Bay Area, and thank you, Sindhu. She's a PhD in AI. I should mention that, and I'm proud to say a member of NASSCOM's Deep Tech Club. Welcome, Sindhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So next up, we have Monish Darda. Monish is co-founder and CTO at iCertis, which he started nearly 12 years back and has built into one of the global market leaders in the contract management space. Monish has also founded multiple companies prior to iCertis. Welcome, Monish.
Thank you so much, Atul. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. Last but not least, we have Sparsh Gupta. Sparsh is co-founder and CEO at Wingify, which coincidentally he also started around 12 years back, and is one of the global market leaders in the A/B testing and broadly the experimentation space. Welcome, Sparsh.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Atul.
Okay. So panelists, let's jump right into it. Let me start by teeing this up. As we know today, product in India is only about a decade or decade and a half old. I think the journey of Wingify and iCertis mirrors the evolution. And I know, Sindhu, you're just, kind of more in the early stage. And we are the third largest startup ecosystem today, and with deep tech, SaaS, and the verticalization trend globally, we're on the cusp of an unprecedented software revolution here in India. And the expectation is that this decade we will rise to become a product powerhouse. And this was well stated by the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji in his inaugural address, who said that we must build world-class products from India. So that's our aspiration. So since the theme is building for the world, my first question is, what are your views on building in India or, but selling globally, right? Versus only selling in India market. And the thesis there has been that to build a very scaled B2B business out of India, you need to focus globally. So would love to hear, the views of the panel on how should entrepreneurs think about the strategy here. So we'll start with Monish. I know you've built quite a bit of scale. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and we were one of the 3 B2B SaaS unicorns in India that came in, and it was an interesting experience, primarily because we always had 2 stages. The first stage was build in India and then test in India, the product market fit, because it was obviously cheaper, better. You had already had the relationships, and then go sell to the world. So that experience has been very interesting because I think one of the things, you're absolutely right, you cannot build a big substantial B2B SaaS business unless you're looking at it globally. Retail is probably a very different thing because the market is very different, and the size of the market in India takes care of the the whole total addressable market. But if you go to the B2B SaaS or B2B segment, then obviously you have to think about the world. The interesting part, though, I think when you go in there was one was focus. You have to make sure when you make that step. I've seen too many, and I've been one of them who made the mistake of focus or earlier than we should have, and that is expensive, both in time and money. So those are those two parts in my mind which are very critical. You have to think about the timing, and you have to think about the world. You cannot build a product, especially in today's economy, in today's world, for India if you're in B2B, in my mind.
Got it. Well, thank you, Monish. It's certainly a much more global world today. Sparsh, I know you have a very scaled global business as well. Your thoughts?
Unlike what Monish mentioned, our approach has been that build in India and serve to the world. In fact, since inception, and even today now, after almost 11, 12 years of business, I think India revenue contributes not more than 2% of our total revenue right now, and most of the revenue really comes from North America and Europe, parts of Western Europe, the United Kingdom, and all that. And obviously, what happened for us might not be a generic consensus with all these startups. I think just taking a step back, I will really talk about the problems that we solve, and especially in our case, the problems that we tried solving for A/B testing and conversion optimization and larger experimentation. And we solve it for e-commerce and some of the media software companies. India, probably until 4 or 5 years back, was not even a large market. And from the point of view, I don't think there's a lot of companies who really had that problem. So if we were doing something else, if we were solving a problem which Indian businesses had, we could have definitely focused on the Indian market. And being in India, we have done multiple times attempts to tap into the Indian market. We had dedicated teams focusing on India, but we always realized that the ROI of all the focus that we have in India is far lower than if we do the same focus in the West. So I think a lot of us, including Wingify for sure, are solving problems where a much larger market exists in the West. So it makes a lot more economical sense to sell in the West. But there's some companies, and there's some companies for sure that I'm aware of, are trying to solve problems which are very specific to Indian market, and that market is that those problems are such that businesses might be willing to pay as well, and those can really flourish in Indian ecosystem. I think the second viewpoint here, which is slightly contradicting Atul, is I've also seen that India has a massive the long chain or the not so sophisticated segment which have those problems, but then their willingness to pay slightly reduces. And some of the advantages that we have, which is access to a lot of talent and the economics of sort of building it out, do not make a lot of sense for those consumers in India, because I've seen some conversations happening where the build versus buy, the leverage we have when we do it in the US or Europe, the leverage is far more because their build is very expensive. And I've seen some companies in India, not the most sophisticated one, but the long tail, end up sort of getting on the build versus buy spectrum. And that's when, a SaaS product from India do not really make so much sense to them economically. So I think, either ways, a lot of problems that we are solving are problems which exist massively in the West. Second, the willingness to pay in the US is far more just because of the build versus buy sort of difference there, which is not so much in India. So yeah, I think my experience for scale, definitely West has to be tapped into, but if you get into a problem which is largely in India, then of course India can also have massive product companies.
Yeah. No, well said, Sparsh. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be either or. India is more of a digital laggard market, as both of you said, and maybe the mature markets are more, sort of early adopters, and both of you have certainly been early. Next, let me.
I think Sparsh brought up a very important point, so I couldn't help interrupting. I think it's all about product market fit, right? Yeah. If you don't have the market, you obviously have to look elsewhere. So it's all about it. I think, and it's interesting, just the cost of build versus buy. We do contract management, and most of the large IT services companies in India are our customers, and they are extremely well-paying customers. So it also boils down to value. It's like that kitna deti hai, the Maruti Suzuki ad, right? People are very conscious, but once they see that there is benefit, it goes out of the equation in my experience.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. So, with our aspiration to be a product nation, if you were to do a dipstick today, where do you think we are? And, how competitive are we, building products from India? And I know all of you play in different industries, different size segments perhaps. And, how do you For example, how do you benchmark yourselves individually versus your global peers and competition? It'll be great to get your perspective, Sindhu.
Yeah, so thanks everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I play in the CogniCor play in the financial services market, and also in the conversational AI automation, RPA kind of automation kind of sector. So here it is a very emerging sector, and there is no leading players neither in the Indian market nor in the US market. But it is characterized by two types of players. One is large Microsofts of the world, Salesforce of the world. So they are some of the leading ones, simply because they sell CRM products to these customer segment, but they don't dominate the market. And we also have many players like emerging players, but we don't see a lot of presence from founders from India or companies that are in the Indian developed from the India space. What we given that what we see is like for example, CogniCor, we have been selling to some of the leading customers in the wealth and insurance space. And these are companies that are like big Salesforce shop or big Microsoft shop, and we were able to penetrate that kind of a market, competing with them, like head-on compete, and even with a price differentiation that is remarkable. Like some of their pricing is like packaged into the CRM, which means that they literally get the product for free. So we were able to compete against that and carve out a space for us. So I think there is a huge opportunity there, and we are able to, in terms of product and technology, we are able to, compete in a real scale, as well as like, in terms of go-to-market. But there needs to be like a lot more, funding injected into this space to play at that game. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Excellent. That's great to hear. And Sparsh, you've seen a lot of scale, you've seen a lot of global business. How would you benchmark India today as a product nation?
So I think, it's very hard to benchmark. It's very hard to, benchmark really, but I do believe that there's a lot of potential. There's definitely a lot of potential. The growth in product companies in the last 10 years, has been massive and off the roof, and not something that we anticipated 10 years back when we started Wingify. I think, I will agree to Sindhu completely that when it comes to tech and building a product, I think India got all the talent, the benchmark of the quality of people available, and the sort of work that companies are doing is at par with the work happening elsewhere outside India. But I think the only, limitations that at times, I've seen is just because we are, away from the customers. So the understanding of the real problems that the customers are facing and really doing that go-to-market and really doing that validation of whatever solutions they're doing, that's where, I've seen some of the Indian companies struggle. Also having the fact that, the limitation of talent in India from the point of leadership talent of people who have done it in the past. So that they can really understand and empathize with the problems of our end customers, which are pretty much sitting in the US. I think this is one area that we have to really bridge. And with more and more companies, crossing the bridge, really, understanding how the companies in the US work, even this limitation is getting away. Now, if we really understand the problems very well, I'm pretty confident that we are already making very good solutions of those problems. And if we also are able to validate them efficiently and market them, because we understand the problems very well, I don't think there's any limitation of why we will not be a very, very big product nation. It's just that, we're still on the journey, and that's what my views are.
Thank you.
I have a unique perspective on this. Like, I think Sparsh, brought out a great point, but what I would like to highlight is India is in a very unique position. I'm talking about financial services because, that's what I'm familiar with. Some of the, large, financial service firms like Fidelity, Bank of America, Pershing, all of them have their, back office in India, which means that they understand the customers. They serve the customers on a daily basis. They have their IT departments there. That means that, every system that is built for these financial service firms, India understands that. And they finally also have the BPO processes, BPO firms, which means that they understand the end-to-end cycle of these businesses. So imagine putting together all of these things. As a team in India, if you are putting together all of these people, they understand more than anyone sitting in anywhere else in the world, like, how these firms work. Yeah. The problem is, when a startup start building a business, they don't look at these talent, and these talent rarely come in contact with the startups. So what we have done in CogniCor is we learned the hard way, but we realized that we can tap into these talent, and we brought on board experts from financial services who have worked in this space, and experts from ITs who have worked in these firms. So we have built a talent pool that makes an interesting sense. We didn't really just hire from the IT sector alone, and that made a huge difference. Like they understood the problems like nobody else. So I think that is a formula that startups can follow very well.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is all of you are deep specialists around your use cases. That's how you can compete with the larger platforms as well. Next, let me ask what has made all of you successful so far as a global competitor? If you were to summarize your formula or your secret sauce, what stands out, Monish?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I'll take a segue from Sindhu. I think what she said was very interesting. Also, you have to have a lot of things come together. One of the things that came together for us 10 years ago was, you always have to ride a wave or create a wave. There has to be something that is changing in the market. And we got this contract lifecycle management space down right, where, we ended up redefining that whole category. And if you look at the Forrester Wave and the Gartner Magic Quadrant, we are way up on, top right. I think I don't think there's one formula, of course, but there are some principles, and those principles are, one is focus. I think, most people, like including me, this is my 7th startup, most people kind of lose focus very quickly. This is like, I was at Tadoba, this Atul at the Tiger Reserve, and we saw a leopard stalking a deer. And there were like 8 or 10 jeeps around it, just taking pictures and making noise and so on. That thing was completely focused on the deer. It's very interesting to see, what focus makes you change how you look at a product, how you look at a platform, how you look at selling, how you look at customer support. So many of these things that make a great product and a great platform. The second one is just the product market fit. Knowing when to not listen to your customer is also as important an art as listening to your customer, and you have to be close to the customer for that. And I think a lot of people also, again, including me, because I've gone through that, they forget that and how to work with potential customers to be successful. And sometimes it's very difficult in India if you're building in India for a global market, so you have to take that into account. I think the third one is also, in my mind, as a principle, is also to make sure you are actually looking at a dream that could maybe never be realized, and then you have a mission. So this mission, vision, and values thing is absolutely critical. The mission gives you focus. The vision gives you that ability to dream. We said we'll transform the foundation of commerce. People laughed at us, and we said, hey, that's our dream. And you can't laugh at dreams. And then the mission was very focused, building the contract intelligence platform of the world, which was very doable. And then we had our values. I think those 3 principles, I think, were what really made this magic possible.
Great, and I love what you said about product market fit versus customer market fit. I think, we have a particular problem, and I agree. I think distractions are an anti-scale pattern. Sparsh, your views?
I completely agree with what Monish mentioned, and I think I just want to double down on the fact of focus. In the last 10 years, I think the number one mistake that we have done multiple times is get distracted. Time and again, we have seen that from a larger scheme of things, we'll try to do hundreds of things. There's so many things that we can do. There's so many problems that we can solve. And a lot of time teams, specifically starts focusing on some things which is not very important. So I think focus is important, but what you're focusing on is very important. And I think in the last few months and years, what we started doing is really questioning every single thing that is going on in the organization from the point of view of what value will it create for the customers. And when somebody had a list of 100 items to be done, when we passed through this filter, it's surprising that only 5 or 6 really pass the test. That a lot of these things that you try to do will not create that much of value. They probably are good to have in the product. They will definitely scale your product. They're good to do if you got that bandwidth. But really having focus on what will add value, and to really understand and estimate and forecast, the value, you really need to understand the problems you're trying to solve and your customers very well. So I think really having a very clear eye on what you're trying to believe, what you're trying to build, what problems are you trying to solve, who is going to pay for it, and what evidence do you have that they will pay for it, and just doing that constantly, endlessly. I think that's the one bit. The formula, again, because your earlier question was what's the formula? I think for us, what has really worked is focus on product. There's so many things that one can do. There are endless things. There's operations is important, finance is important, legal is important, HR is important. There's so many other aspects which is very, very important. And one cannot build a company, without these sort of areas. But then these are not the areas. If you're very sophisticated, these are not the areas which will make you win the market. So really having clear eye on on some of those aspects of what is the core thing that customers are paying for, and that's product. So I think for us, what we've always done since inception is not lower the bar when it comes to product. Really focusing on world-class product. Because you're focusing on product, it's okay to not have enough focus on some of the other aspects and just do an okay job there, but ensure that new customers is never getting us inferior sort of experience. And that's really what has worked for us when we compete in the global ecosystem.
Excellent feedback. Yeah. And, speaking to all of that, one of the areas we're really trying to focus from NASSCOM is around product management, growing product management out of India. With that, let me switch sort of gears, since the whole topic is around, building for the world. The question comes up very often, how should founders look at entering a market like the US? And I know, Sindhu, you're sitting right there, so would love to start with you.
So US is another market, just like India or Europe. So there are two things that I would say as looking at any market. So one is what stage you are in the evolution of the company. And so that is very important, because if you are sitting in India, and I guess we are talking to people building from India and people who are founders who are in India. So sitting in India and building for the US market is it has its own challenges. And so I would say either you have there is easy way to fail, less costly ways to fail. So look at the local market, build solutions that is tried out in the local market. When we started, I started my company from Europe, selling to a global market, to India, to Singapore, to US, and then slowly coming down to one single market. And what I realized in the process is, if you go global in the very first day, you are bound to fail, because you don't understand any customer in any segment. So that is one thing. It's a formula for failure. But if you are sitting in a local market, use that market to one good thing about India is that you can really have a huge number of people using the product, even if it's B2B. We had some of the deployments that is hundreds of thousands of people using the product. That means that you get a very quick feedback loop that helps you refine the product, refine the positioning of the product, and then once you have achieved that stage, then look at one single market and then build for that market. So I think that is one thing that we need to uniquely focus.
Sure. Excellent. Monish, your thoughts, entry into the US market, you're a founder sitting out of India, you've got product market fit. How does one go about it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think I agree with Sindhu in terms of, if you try to kind of do too much at the same time, it's very hard to succeed. I wouldn't say you're bound to fail. I would say it's extremely hard to succeed. But I think, the way we have thought about this always is that every market, regional especially market, and federal in the US, for example, is a separate company on its own. Think about it. Your language is different. The people you hire are very different. Very different skill sets in terms of selling, very different skill sets in terms of customer support. It's almost like running a different company in different geography. Means that if you are, and then you want to shift to another, then you have to make sure that you are willing to put that, investment. It's like almost doing a Series A round, or even for a region, depending on how you start. The US for us especially was no different. My co-founder is in the US, so that made it very simple. He kind of made the whole organization around him. We are headquartered in Seattle now for many different reasons. But what happens then is that essentially you are now looking at a market just like you would look at any other new business. Even though we are an enterprise SaaS company, the code is the same, the platform is the same. It's very, very different when it looks at different geographies, especially in contract management where everything is different, right? Contracting, languages, terms, compliance is completely different from one geography to another. So I would say, think about this as a different company and then off when you are ready to before.
Got it. Excellent. We just have a couple of minutes. So, my final sort of question to all of you, we have tons of leaders from businesses and tech companies and IT services companies tuned in. How can they help make India a product nation in terms of their support, to our product and startup ecosystem? And secondly, any predictions from any of you in terms of what we achieve, by the end of this decade? Sparsh, you want to take a stand?
No, I think when it comes to what we can achieve by the end of this decade, even last decade, I can only recall sitting in almost 2010, and I know where we are sitting as a nation in 2020. We never anticipated, and I think whatever estimates. I do believe that we have a very strong stance to be a market to be globally best product nation. By 2025, 2026, if not by 2030. So pretty confident on the fact the way things have shaped up, especially in the last 4, 5, 6 years. I think as a product nation, India will have a very strong position. When it comes to all the leaders, business leaders in the IT space, I think all the services that they've provided, all the knowledge that they know about the domain. If they really starts thinking of it from a product standpoint, and there's some startup somewhere, some company trying to tap into that sort of market who needs that expertise, and something that Sindhu really pointed out, that having that domain experts is important, and something that we have tried getting a lot, tried finding in the past. I think they really sit in the services industry. So if they try thinking from a product standpoint and start bridging that gap and helping product companies with their expertise, I think that's really is important. That's what they can do for us.
Excellent. Sindhu, your thoughts on where we go this decade as a product nation, sitting out of the US and being from India, obviously, right? Where do you see us going?
Yeah, so India today is the leader of the service world. Like we serve the entire world from a service perspective. And that position, as I have been mentioning, that puts us squarely into becoming the top provider for products as well. Building for the products. So that's my take. Sitting in the US, I see India, China, the Asian countries as the future. Unfortunately, that's I see a lot of young talent and a lot of opportunities there. And so my suggestion is not just look at US or the Western markets for when we are building for the world. We also look at India as a B2B, even not just a B2C, B2B product play, and there are huge number of opportunities. Every country and look at their problems and solve for them. We have huge number of problems. and we can look at that and solve for them.
Sure, sounds good. So big thumbs up. Monish, any quick take in terms of what we achieved this decade?
Yeah,
I know we're out of time. Yeah.
No, absolutely. 10 seconds. So Silicon Valley has always been the model for the world for startups and products and everything else. I think imagine India is like 1,000 times that size, really, from the ecosystem perspective, right? And then kind of bring in, government support, bring in the talent, bring in as Sindhu said, the whole process kind of equation. And then bring in just that thinking of, hey, if I have $1 revenue in services, a product dollar revenue is actually worth at least $20.
Yeah.
So that scale is going to be very, very interesting. And for everyone else, I would say, whether you are doing IT services, whether you're in a startup or you have running a business, just dream, because these dreams are now possible.
Yeah.
I think that's where I would conclude.
That's a wonderful way to round it off. So dream big. Well, that was very insightful and exciting to hear all of your thoughts and where India is headed for building for the world. I really want to thank you, Sindhu, Sparsh, Monish, and it was very exciting. And thank you again. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That is innovation and cutting edge tech that's creating waves. Thank you so much for letting us know as to what all of us need to do to make India a global product powerhouse. This is a sure eye-opener, and I'm sure it inspires you to want to take the industry by storm and contribute to the larger story of real impact. Those segments actually make you think about what is it that you can do even within your own realms of business and within your own realms of reach of what it is that can be innovated on, and how can we make sure that this dream becomes a real goal to chase.